It was New Year's Eve morning when Simone Wallace's entire world shifted with 7 casual words from her husband. She was sitting in her home office, reviewing architectural blueprints for a luxury hotel project that had consumed the last 6 months of her life. The morning light filtered through the windows of their brownstone in a way that made everything look deceptively peaceful. Her Mont-Blanc pen moved across the paper with a precision that had made her one of the most sought-after architects in the city. And then Derek walked in, coffee mug in hand, with that easy smile he'd perfected over their 8 years of marriage, and said, "So, I invited Vanessa to dinner tonight." Simone's pen stopped mid-signature. "She's in town, going through a divorce, seemed lonely. You don't mind, right?" Vanessa. Derek's ex-girlfriend. The woman he'd dated for 3 years in college. The woman his mother still compared Simone to at every family gathering. The woman Derek himself had once called the one that got away, during a wine-soaked dinner party 2 years into their marriage, laughing it off as a joke while Simone's smile never quite reached her eyes. And now this woman was coming to their New Year's Eve dinner. Tonight. In their home. Simone looked up at her husband, and in that moment, something inside her went perfectly, dangerously still. Her face remained composed, pleasant even, but behind her dark eyes, calculations were already forming. Because Simone Wallace hadn't built a career on reading structural integrity in buildings alone. She'd spent a lifetime reading the structural weaknesses in people. But let me back up. Let me tell you who Simone really was, because understanding that is understanding everything that came next. Simone grew up as the daughter of an alcoholic father. Not the kind of alcoholic who hit or screamed, but the kind who lied. Smooth, convincing lies that her mother believed year after year, excuse after excuse. Just one drink with the guys from work. The money went to car repairs. "I promise this is the last time." Little Simone would sit at the top of the stairs, watching her mother's face cycle through hope, then doubt, then resignation as her father spun his tales. By the time she was 10, Simone could spot a lie from across a room. The way someone's eyes shifted just slightly to the left. The unconscious touching of the neck. The overcompensation in tone. She learned to read people the way other children learn to read books. That skill had served her well. She'd put herself through architecture school, graduated top of her class, and built a reputation for seeing what others missed. Not just in buildings but in people, in situations, in the tiny details that everyone else overlooked. It made her exceptional at her job. It made her dangerous when crossed. And right now, looking at Derek's too casual expression as he waited for her response about his ex-girlfriend joining their intimate New Year's Eve dinner, every alarm bell in Simone's carefully constructed life was screaming. But she didn't show it. Instead she smiled. "Of course, darling. The more the merrier." Derek's shoulders visibly relaxed. He moved behind her, kissed the top of her head, and said something about how understanding she was, how this was why he loved her. Simone barely heard him. Her mind was already racing backward, compiling evidence she'd been subconsciously collecting for weeks. The previous Tuesday. She'd come home early from a site meeting to find Derek in the kitchen, his phone face down on the marble counter. Face down. Derek never put his phone face down. He was the kind of person who left its screen up, constantly checking notifications, never worried about privacy because he'd never had anything to hide. Until recently. The week before that. 3 extra gym sessions in 5 days. Derek, who normally complained about going to the gym twice a week, suddenly developing a passionate commitment to fitness. And when he came home he smelled different. Not like sweat and industrial air fresheners. Like something else. Something new. The new cologne. Tom Ford Noir, expensive and subtle. Simone had noticed it 2 weeks ago, noticed that she hadn't bought it for him, noticed that when she commented on it, he'd said it was just something I picked up, with that same casual tone he'd just used about Vanessa. The late-night phone calls he took in his car in the garage. The way he'd started dressing better for work, putting effort into outfits for days when he claimed he had nothing but Zoom meetings. The distance in his eyes when they made love, like he was somewhere else with someone else. Simone had noticed it all. She'd filed it away in the part of her brain that catalogued inconsistencies, the part that had been trained by a childhood of watching her mother ignore red flags until their marriage collapsed in spectacular fashion. But she told herself she was being paranoid. That 8 years of marriage meant something. That Derek wasn't her father and she wasn't her mother, and their life together was solid. Except now Vanessa was coming to dinner. 3 days earlier, Simone had met her colleague and closest friend, Julian Cross, for lunch at their usual spot in Midtown. Julian was a fellow architect at her firm, razor-sharp and wickedly observant, the kind of friend who saw through everyone's carefully constructed facades. They'd been reviewing a proposal over salads when Julian had set down his fork and said, "Okay, I have to ask. What's going on with Derek?" Simone had looked up, surprised. "What do you mean? He's been weird lately, right? More secretive?" Julian had tilted his head, studying her face the way she studied everyone else's. "I saw him last week at that new wine bar downtown. He was with a woman. Blonde, very polished, lots of touching. When he saw me, he practically jumped out of his skin. Said it was a work colleague, but Simone, I know Derek's work colleagues. That wasn't one of them." Simone had felt something cold settle in her stomach. "He probably just didn't want you to interrupt his work meeting." Julian had given her a look. "Sure. And I'm straight." She'd laughed it off, changed the subject, but that conversation had planted something. A seed of certainty that was now blooming into full awareness as Derek hummed his way out of her office, thrilled that his wife was so understanding about his ex-girlfriend joining their romantic holiday dinner. Now, alone in her office, Simone stared at her reflection in the darkened computer screen. 38 years old. Successful. Beautiful. Married to a man who was apparently stupid enough to think she wouldn't notice. Her phone was in her hand before she consciously decided to make the call. Julian answered on the second ring. "Tell me you're calling to say you finally fired that incompetent intern." "I need you to come to dinner tonight," Simone said, her voice level. "And I need you to help me with something." There was a pause. Then Julian's voice shifted, lower, more serious. "What's happening?" "Derek invited Vanessa. His ex. The one his mother loves more than me. The one he dated for 3 years before she dumped him." "Jesus Christ. He didn't." "He did. And Julian, I think," she stopped, let out a breath. "I think something's been going on. I think I've been a fool." "You've never been a fool a day in your life," Julian said firmly. "What do you need?" "I need a witness. I need someone in that room who's on my side. And I need," she paused, thinking. "I need you to bring that recording pen you use for client meetings. The one that looks like a regular pen." Another pause, longer this time. "Simone, what are you planning?" She stood up, walked to the built-in bookshelf that lined one wall of her office. Behind a row of architecture books was a small safe that Derek didn't know about. She'd installed it herself years ago, back when she'd first moved into this house that she'd bought with her inheritance money. The house that was in her name alone, though Derek seemed to have forgotten that detail. "I'm planning to stop being my mother," Simone said quietly. She ended the call and opened the safe. Inside was a locked metal box she hadn't touched in years. In it were documents, papers, things she'd saved from her past. But also things she'd prepared for a future she'd hoped would never come. Because Simone Wallace had learned, watching her mother's devastation, that you never, ever let yourself be blindsided. Her mind drifted back to when she was 16. It was a Tuesday night, ordinary in every way except for what it became. She'd been doing homework at the kitchen table when her mother had finally reached her breaking point. 20 years of lies, of excuses, of choosing to believe because believing was easier than facing the truth. But that night, her father had come home with lipstick on his collar and liquor on his breath and a story so ridiculous that even her mother's desperate need to believe couldn't accept it. Simone had watched from the doorway as her mother packed 2 suitcases with shaking hands. Had listened as her father begged, promised, swore it would be different. Had seen the exact moment her mother's face hardened into something new, something that looked like freedom even though it was wrapped in pain. As they'd driven away that night, her mother's makeup running down her face, she turned to 16-year-old Simone and said, "Promise me something. Promise me you'll never let a man make you this stupid. Promise me you'll always pay attention." Simone had promised. And she had kept that promise, or at least she'd thought she had. She'd paid attention to everything. To Derek's moods, his patterns, his rhythms. She'd built a marriage on awareness and intention. But somewhere along the way she'd stopped looking at what that awareness was actually telling her. She'd seen the signs and chosen to look away because looking directly at them meant facing something she didn't want to face. But now, holding this box, with Derek's casual invitation echoing in her mind, Simone was done looking away. Before we go any further, if you're invested in seeing how Simone handles this disaster of a dinner party, hit that subscribe button right now because this story is about to get absolutely wild. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when Derek's ex walks through that door. She opened the box. Inside were manila folders, USB drives, business cards for lawyers she'd researched but never called, account information for a separate bank account Derek knew nothing about. Things she'd prepared years ago, just in case, because her mother's voice was always in the back of her mind. Never let yourself be trapped. Simone pulled out one particular folder. It contained printouts of all their financial accounts, property deeds, insurance policies, everything that mattered. She'd updated it religiously every 6 months for the entire 8 years of their marriage. Derek thought she was paranoid. She thought of it as practical. Now she spread the papers across her desk and began to make notes. Her architectural mind, trained to see structures and stress points and potential failures, turned to her marriage with the same analytical precision. Where were the weak points? Where had the foundation cracked? And most importantly, what was she going to do about it? Her phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Making reservations at Marchetti's for 7. Intimate table. Just the 4 of us with Mom. Vanessa is excited to finally meet you properly. 4 of us. Derek, Simone, Vanessa, and Gretchen, Derek's mother, who had never forgiven Simone for not being Vanessa. The woman who still, at every family gathering, managed to work in some comment about how Vanessa had such elegant taste, such a way with people, such a successful career in pharmaceutical sales. Simone's fingers tightened on her phone. Then she texted back, "Actually, let's do dinner here. More intimate. I'll cook. Also, I've invited Julian." She watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again. Derek was choosing his words carefully. Finally, "Okay. Sounds great. Can't wait. Can't wait. To bring his ex-girlfriend to dinner with his wife. Can't wait." Simone set down her phone and looked at herself in the mirror hanging above her desk. Her reflection looked calm, composed, professional. But her eyes told a different story. They held something that hadn't been there this morning. Something calculating and cold and absolutely certain. She thought about her mother's tears on that long-ago drive. Thought about all the women she'd known who'd been caught off guard, who'd trusted too much, who'd believed too easily. Thought about every lie her father had told and every lie her mother had accepted. And she made a decision. If Derek wanted to play games, if he wanted to bring the woman he was clearly involved with into their home and make Simone smile through it, then fine. She would smile. She would be the perfect hostess. She would play the part of the understanding wife who didn't suspect a thing. But she would also be ready. Because Simone Wallace had spent her entire life learning to see what was hidden. And tonight she was going to make sure that everyone else saw it too. She pulled out her laptop and began to type. A project, she'd call it. A presentation. The kind she made for clients, professional and detailed and absolutely devastating in its thoroughness. The afternoon passed in focused preparation. Simone moved through her house with purpose, selecting china, planning the menu, arranging flowers. To anyone watching, she would have looked like a woman excited for a dinner party. But each action was calculated. Each detail was intentional. She was building something the way she built structures out of steel and glass and stone. Except this structure was made of truth, and it was going to bring something else crashing down. As the winter sun began to set over the city, casting long shadows through her windows, Simone Wallace stood in her kitchen and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a woman who had finally stopped lying to herself and was about to make sure no one else could lie to her either. Derek came home at 5:30, arms full of wine bottles and that nervous energy people have when they're about to do something monumentally stupid. He kissed her cheek, told her how great everything looked, how much he appreciated her being so cool about tonight. And Simone smiled and said, "Of course, darling. What are we if we can't be gracious?" What indeed? Here's what I want to know from you. Have you ever had that moment where you suddenly realized something had been right in front of you the whole time? Where all the little pieces clicked into place and you saw the truth you'd been avoiding? Drop your story in the comments, because Simone's about to have several more of those moments, and none of them are going to be pleasant. The clock ticked toward 7. Toward the moment when Vanessa would walk through that door. Toward the moment when Simone would stop being the trusting wife and become something else entirely. And in her office, on her computer, a presentation file sat ready. Titled simply, "The Truth." Derek had no idea what was coming next. But he was about to find out. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock, and Simone watched from the kitchen doorway as her husband practically sprinted to answer it. Not walked. Not moved with casual purpose. Sprinted. Like a teenager rushing to greet his prom date. Derek's hand was already on the doorknob before the chime had finished echoing through their home, and in that single moment of eagerness, Simone saw everything she'd been refusing to see for months. She took a slow breath, smoothed down the emerald silk blouse she'd chosen specifically because Derek had once told her it made her eyes look calculating, and prepared herself for whatever was about to walk through that door. What walked through was Vanessa Kirkland, and she was exactly what Simone had expected. Worse, actually, because she was beautiful in that effortless way that comes from money and good genetics and never having to try too hard for anything. She wore a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, something that hugged her figure in a way that was elegant and provocative at the same time. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and when she moved, the scent of her perfume preceded her. Chanel, if Simone's nose was correct. Expensive. Deliberately chosen. But it was the hug that told Simone everything. Vanessa stepped into Derek's arms like she was coming home. Not the polite embrace of old friends reconnecting. Not the careful distance of exes who had moved on. This was intimate. Familiar. Her hands splayed across his back with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how that body felt, who had mapped its geography long before Simone ever had the chance. The hug lasted 3 seconds too long. Just enough to be inappropriate. Just enough to stake a claim. When they finally separated, Derek's face was flushed, and there was something in his eyes that made Simone's stomach turn. Joy. Relief. Like something missing had suddenly clicked back into place. Vanessa turned to Simone then, and her smile was dazzling. Perfect white teeth, warm eyes, the kind of expression that probably made most people instantly like her. But Simone had spent a lifetime reading faces, and she could see the calculation behind that warmth. The assessment. The quiet confidence of a woman who thought she'd already won. You must be Simone. Vanessa glided forward, arms outstretched. Derek has told me so much about you. I've been absolutely dying to meet the woman who finally tamed him. Tamed him. Like he was some wild thing that needed breaking in. Like Simone's entire marriage was just a temporary domestication of a man who'd always belonged to someone else. Simone accepted the air kisses Vanessa offered, one on each cheek, European style. Up close, she could see that Vanessa's makeup was flawless, her skin glowing with the kind of expensive skincare routine that took time and money and dedication. She smelled like jasmine and something else, something warmer. Amber maybe. It was intoxicating and deliberate, and Simone hated that she noticed, hated that some small, insecure part of her wondered if Derek noticed too. It's lovely to finally meet you, Simone said, her voice steady and warm. Derek's told me so much about his college days. I feel like I already know you. It was a perfectly polite lie. Derek had barely mentioned Vanessa over the years, except in those unguarded moments when wine loosened his tongue and nostalgia made him stupid. But Vanessa didn't need to know that. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Gretchen, Derek's mother, arriving in a cloud of Hermes scarf and thinly veiled disapproval. Gretchen Wallace was 77 years old and looked like old money personified. Pearls, cashmere, that particular shade of blonde that wealthy women maintain through strategic highlighting. She'd never liked Simone, not from the moment Derek had brought her home 8 years ago. Simone wasn't from the right family, didn't have the right connections, didn't fit into the country club world that Gretchen inhabited. But when Gretchen saw Vanessa, her entire face transformed. Oh Vanessa. Oh darling, it's been too long. She swept past Simone without so much as a greeting and embraced Vanessa like a long-lost daughter. Which, in Gretchen's mind, she probably was. The daughter-in-law that should have been. The woman who understood their world, who spoke their language, who knew which fork to use at a formal dinner without having to learn. Mrs. Wallace, you look absolutely radiant, Vanessa said, and the two women beamed at each other with genuine affection. Gretchen finally turned to Simone, and her smile cooled by about 40 degrees. Simone. Happy New Year. No hug. No warmth. Just a curt nod like Simone was the hired help. 8 years of marriage to her son, and Gretchen still greeted her like a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong house. Happy New Year, Gretchen, Simone replied evenly, refusing to let the dismissal sting. She'd had years of practice not reacting to her mother-in-law's subtle cruelties. The doorbell rang a third time, and this time Simone answered it herself. Julian stood on the doorstep in a perfectly tailored navy suit, a bottle of expensive champagne in one hand and concern written all over his face. I got your text about bringing the recording pen, he murmured as he stepped inside, kissing her cheek. It's in my jacket pocket. Are you sure about this? Completely, Simone whispered back. Then louder for the benefit of everyone watching, Julian. So glad you could make it. Come meet everyone. She led him into the living room where Derek, Vanessa, and Gretchen had already formed a tight circle, laughing about something. They looked like a family. Like they belonged together. And Simone, standing in the doorway of her own home, felt like an outsider looking in. Julian clocked the dynamic immediately. His eyes swept the room, taking in the body language, the proximity, the way Derek's attention was completely focused on Vanessa. He positioned himself next to Simone, a silent show of solidarity, and she felt grateful for his presence in a way that made her throat tight. "Shall we move to the dining room?" Simone suggested, her voice cutting through the laughter. "Dinner's ready." The dining room table was set beautifully. Simone had used their best china, the Wedgwood set that had been a wedding gift from Derek's aunt. Crystal wine glasses caught the light from the chandelier overhead. White roses in a low arrangement provided an elegant centerpiece. Everything looked perfect, like something out of a lifestyle magazine. And then Derek started seating people, and Simone's carefully maintained composure nearly cracked. He put Vanessa at the head of the table. Simone's seat. The seat she'd occupied for every dinner party, every holiday meal, every casual Tuesday night supper for the past 8 years. The seat that was hers by right and tradition, and the simple fact that this was her goddamn house. Derek did it without thinking, automatically, like Vanessa had always belonged there. Like she still belonged there. He pulled out the chair with a flourish, and Vanessa sat with a gracious smile, arranging her napkin in her lap like a queen taking her throne. Simone stood frozen for just a moment, watching this play out. Then she smiled, walked to the opposite end of the table and sat down. Julian immediately took the seat to her right, shooting her a look that said, "We'll talk about this later." Gretchen settled in next to Vanessa, and Derek took the remaining seat, which happened to be directly across from his ex-girlfriend. "Perfect. Just perfect." "This looks absolutely divine, Simone," Vanessa said, surveying the table. "You went to so much trouble. I feel terrible imposing on your holiday like this." "No, you don't," Simone thought. "You feel triumphant." "No trouble at all," she said aloud. "I love hosting. And any friend of Derek's is always welcome in our home." She emphasized the word "our" just slightly. A reminder that this house, this life, this marriage belonged to her. But if Vanessa caught the subtle territorial marking, she didn't show it. Simone served the first course, a butternut squash soup she'd made from scratch that afternoon. As everyone began eating, the conversation naturally fell into the rhythm that Simone had been dreading. Derek, Vanessa, and Gretchen started swapping stories about the past, about college days and summer vacations and all the shared history that Simone had no part in. "Remember that summer in the Hamptons?" Gretchen was saying, her face animated in a way Simone rarely saw. "When you two drove out in that ridiculous convertible Derek had borrowed? Oh God, that car." Vanessa laughed, a musical sound that made Derek's face light up. "It broke down twice on the way there. We ended up sleeping in it overnight at a rest stop because we were too proud to call for help." "Best night of that summer," Derek said, grinning at Vanessa with an expression that made Simone want to throw her soup bowl at his head. "Really?" Simone interjected, keeping her voice light. "Sleeping in a broken-down car was the best night?" Derek had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Well, we were young. Everything felt like an adventure back then." "Some adventures are worth remembering," Vanessa said, her eyes never leaving Derek's face. The stories continued through the soup course and into the main dish, beef Wellington that Simone had spent 3 hours preparing. Each memory was a small weapon. Each shared laugh was a tiny cut. Derek and Vanessa talking about professors they'd had, parties they'd attended, inside jokes that no one else understood. Gretchen adding her own memories, talking about how much she'd loved having Vanessa around, how elegant she'd always been, how perfect she and Derek had seemed together. And through it all, Simone smiled and nodded and played the gracious hostess while quietly dying inside. Then Vanessa said, "Derek and I had this tradition. Every New Year's Eve, we'd go to the winter carnival downtown and ride the Ferris wheel. We'd time it perfectly so we'd be at the top right at midnight for our kiss." "Do they still do that? The carnival?" Derek's face went soft with nostalgia. "God, I haven't thought about that in years. Yeah, I think they still do it. I see the lights from my office building sometimes. A tradition. A midnight kiss. Something romantic and sweet and completely separate from anything he'd ever done with Simone. Their New Year's Eve tradition involved champagne at home and watching the ball drop on TV, nothing particularly special or memorable. Certainly nothing as picture-perfect as kissing at the top of a Ferris wheel. Simone set down her wine glass carefully. "How lovely. We should start new traditions though, shouldn't we? Build our own memories." It was a gentle assertion, a reminder that Derek's life was supposed to be with her now, not trapped in amber with the woman sitting at the head of Simone's table. But Gretchen, with that particular talent she had for finding the exact wrong thing to say, smiled coldly at Simone and said, "Some traditions are worth keeping, dear. They become part of who we are." The message was clear. You can marry him, but you'll never replace what he had with her. Under the table, Julian kicked Simone's foot. When she glanced at him, he mouthed, "What are you planning?" She gave him the tiniest shake of her head. "Not yet. Soon, but not yet." The conversation flowed on, more wine was poured, and Simone excused herself to check on dessert. She needed a moment away from that table, away from the sounds of Derek's laughter mixing with Vanessa's, away from Gretchen's pointed barbs. She was in the kitchen, hands braced against the counter, taking deep breaths when she heard it. The powder room was just off the hallway, its door slightly ajar. And through that door came Vanessa's voice, low and confident, talking to someone on the phone. It's going exactly as planned. She has no idea. He'll be mine again by Valentine's Day. Simone's blood turned to ice. She stood perfectly still, barely breathing, listening to her husband's ex-girlfriend plot the destruction of her marriage in Simone's own home. Vanessa's voice was casual, almost bored, like this was just another business transaction she was closing. I know. I thought it would be harder, but honestly, she's so trusting. And he's so easy. It's almost too simple. No, she hasn't suspected anything. We've been careful. Yes, since last summer. The divorce was always part of the plan, you know that. Once I'm officially single and she's out of the picture, it's just a matter of. The toilet flushed, cutting off whatever Vanessa was about to say. Simone moved quickly, silently, back into the kitchen and busied herself with the dessert plates. A moment later, Vanessa emerged from the hallway, checked her reflection in the decorative mirror by the door, and returned to the dining room. Simone stood alone in her kitchen, vanilla creme brulee forgotten on the counter, and felt something inside her shift. That last tiny part of her that had been hoping this was all a misunderstanding, that Derek was just being thoughtlessly nostalgic, that Vanessa was just a friend, died completely. This was calculated. Planned. They'd been together since last summer. 6 months of lies. 6 months of her husband coming home and kissing her goodnight while carrying on with another woman. And that woman was now sitting at Simone's dinner table, in Simone's seat, plotting to take Simone's life. When she walked back into the dining room, dessert plates balanced perfectly on a tray, everyone looked up and smiled. But Simone's energy had changed. Julian noticed it immediately, his eyes sharpening with concern. Derek, oblivious as always, just reached for his creme brulee with enthusiasm. If you're as furious as I am right now, make sure you're subscribed because what Simone does next is going to blow your mind. This woman is about to show everyone what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. Simone had just set down the last dessert plate when Derek's phone, face down on the table, began to buzz. What? Twice? 3 times in quick succession. He grabbed it quickly, glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. The buzzing continued. Someone was calling repeatedly, desperately trying to reach him. Aren't you going to get that, honey? Simone asked sweetly. Seems urgent. Derek's eyes darted to Vanessa for just a fraction of a second before returning to Simone. It's nothing. Work stuff. On New Year's Eve? Simone tilted her head, her voice full of concern. That's unusual. Maybe you should check? It might be important. Your company works you too hard, Derek, Vanessa chimed in, her voice dripping with sympathy. You always were too dedicated. Remember when you missed that concert because you were working on that merger? You've always put your career first. The intimacy in her voice, the casual knowledge of Derek's work habits, the familiar way she spoke about his priorities, it all landed like tiny bombs around the table. She was marking territory, reminding everyone that she knew Derek in ways that predated Simone, in ways that suggested she still knew him better than his own wife did. Derek silenced his phone and shoved it in his pocket. It can wait. Let's just enjoy the evening. But the mood had shifted. Julian was watching Derek with barely concealed disgust. Gretchen was pretending not to notice anything wrong, but her lips had thinned into a tight line. Vanessa looked pleased, like the disruption had worked in her favor somehow. And Simone? Simone was done. Done pretending. Done smiling. Done playing the gracious hostess while these people dismantled her life right in front of her. She took a sip of her wine, set down her glass and said, Before we have dessert, I actually prepared something special. A little New Year's tradition of my own. If you'll all excuse me for just one moment. She stood and walked to her office, leaving 4 confused people staring after her. In her office, she picked up her laptop and the small remote for the television mounted on the dining room wall. Her hands were steady. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. When she walked back into the dining room, laptop in hand, Derek's expression shifted to confusion. Simone? What's going on? Just a little presentation, she said brightly. I've been working on a project, and I thought tonight would be the perfect time to share it with everyone. She connected her laptop to the television and pulled up the file she'd been preparing all afternoon. The screen came to life and in simple, elegant lettering the title appeared. The true story of us. Simone, Derek said, his voice uncertain now. What is this? She smiled at him, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who had finally stopped lying to herself and was about to make sure everyone else stopped lying too. Just wait, she said. You're going to love it. Here's what I want to know. Have you ever reached a point where you were just done? Where something switched in you and you decided that enough was enough? Drop a comment and let me know, because Simone just reached that point, and what happens next is going to change everything. The first slide appeared on the screen, and for a moment, everything in the room seemed to freeze. It was a photo from Simone and Derek's wedding day. 8 years ago, on a perfect October afternoon, when the leaves were golden and the air was crisp and Simone had actually believed in happy endings. In the photo they were laughing, Derek dipping her back in an exaggerated pose while she clutched her bouquet and grinned at the camera. They looked young and happy and completely, stupidly in love. This is us, Simone said, her voice steady as she advanced to the next slide. 8 years ago. The day Derek promised to love, honor, and cherish me. For better or worse. In sickness and in health. Forsaking all others. The next few slides cycled through their life together. Their honeymoon in Italy. The day they bought this house. Derek's promotion celebration. Simone's award for designing the Riverside complex. Christmases and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday nights watching movies on the couch. A marriage in pictures, documented proof of a life built together. Derek was staring at the screen, his face a mixture of confusion and growing dread. Vanessa had gone very still, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. Gretchen looked irritated, like this was some gauche display of sentiment that violated proper dinner party etiquette. Only Julian looked pleased, leaning back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone about to watch a long-awaited reckoning. We built something, Derek and I, Simone continued, clicking through more photos. A home. A partnership. A life. Or at least I thought we did. The next slide was just text. Simple, stark words on a black background, but recently I noticed some inconsistencies. Derek's face went pale. Simone, what is this? She didn't answer him. Instead, she advanced to the next slide, and the room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. It was a calendar. 6 months' worth of dates, meticulously tracked. On it, highlighted in bright yellow, were all of Derek's supposed gym sessions. Extra workout, training with Marcus, late session at the gym. 12 visits in the past month alone, a remarkable commitment to fitness from a man who used to complain about going twice a week. But overlaid on that calendar, in red, were flight arrival times. Vanessa's flight arrival times, pulled from airline records that Simone had accessed through Derek's shared airline rewards account that he'd forgotten he'd given her access to years ago. Every single gym session corresponded exactly with Vanessa being in the city. Interesting coincidence, isn't it? Simone said conversationally. Derek suddenly became passionate about fitness right around the time Vanessa started making frequent trips to New York. July 15th, Derek's at the gym from 7 to 9 p.m. Vanessa's flight lands at LaGuardia at 6:30. July 22nd, another gym session. Another flight arrival, this time JFK, 6 p.m. She clicked through more dates, each one showing the same pattern. The yellow and red marks on the calendar aligned with damning precision. Now I have access to Derek's location services. He doesn't know that. Or he forgot. One of those little things married couples share and then forget about. Find my friends, you know? So helpful when you want to make sure your spouse got to work safely. Or when you want to know where they actually are during their gym sessions. The next slide was a map. Multiple maps actually showing Derek's location during those gym sessions. And not a single one of them was at their gym. Instead, the pins dropped on upscale restaurants. Hotel bars. That new wine place in Tribeca that had a 3-month waiting list. One particularly damning pin was dropped at a boutique hotel in Soho. Vanessa's face had gone from pale to ashen. Derek looked like he might be sick. Still just circumstantial though, right? Simone continued, her voice pleasant, like she was presenting quarterly earnings to a board rather than destroying her marriage in real time. I mean, maybe Derek was working out at different locations. Trying new gyms. Very dedicated to fitness variety. Click. The next slide made Derek actually flinch. Text messages. Screenshots of conversations that Derek thought he'd deleted. But Simone had learned long ago that nothing is ever really deleted if you know where to look. Cloud backups, automatic syncing, the digital footprints we all leave behind without realizing it. She'd recovered them all. The first one was from mid-July. Can't stop thinking about seeing you yesterday. When can we do it again? Vanessa's response, soon. I'll make an excuse to come back next week. We just have to be careful. The next message was from August. I bought you something. Can't wait to see you wearing it. Another from September, this one more explicit. Last night was incredible. I've missed you so much. Being with you feels like coming home. And the response, I know. I feel the same way. We just need to be patient. This will all work out. Simone let each message linger on the screen, watching Derek's face crumble with each one. He'd opened his mouth several times to speak, but no words came out. What could he possibly say? The evidence was right there in his own words, undeniable. 6 months, Simone said quietly. 6 months of messages. Of plans. Of lies. And you know what the interesting thing is? Vanessa's divorce. She clicked to the next slide. Court records are public, did you know that? Her divorce was filed 8 months ago. Finalized 3 months ago. Citing irreconcilable differences and mutual agreement to part ways. She turned to look at Vanessa directly for the first time since the presentation began. Very convenient timing. Almost like the divorce was part of a plan. Vanessa's composure was cracking. Her perfectly made-up face was tight with anger and something else. Fear maybe. The look of someone who'd been caught. But wait, Simone said, turning back to the screen. There's more. The next slide was a receipt. Cartier Manhattan location. Dated December 23, just over a week ago. The item, a diamond tennis bracelet. The price, $18,000. Derek went Christmas shopping, Simone said. I was so excited. I thought maybe this year he'd actually surprise me with something meaningful. We've been distant lately and I thought maybe he was planning something special. But Christmas morning came and went and I got a gift card to Williams-Sonoma. A gift card. For the woman who cooks you dinner every night. She zoomed in on the receipt. $18,000 for a diamond bracelet that I never received. I did wonder where it went. All eyes turned to Vanessa's wrist, where a delicate diamond bracelet caught the light from the chandelier. She quickly pulled her sleeve down over it, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it. Gretchen made a small choked sound. Even she, with all her love for Vanessa and disdain for Simone, couldn't deny what that meant. Still, Simone continued, clicking to the next slide, I wanted to be absolutely sure. Because maybe there was some explanation. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe my childhood trauma was making me see betrayal where there was just innocent friendship. The next image made Julian actually laugh out loud. It was a photograph taken from across a restaurant, showing Derek and Vanessa in an intimate booth. His hand was covering hers on the table. Her other hand was touching his face. They were leaning toward each other, completely absorbed, entirely obvious. The timestamp showed it was from 2 weeks ago, December 18th, the night Derek had told Simone he was working late on year-end reports. This was sent to me anonymously, Simone said. Someone who saw you two together and thought I should know. I didn't recognize the number. Maybe a concerned stranger. Maybe someone from Derek's office who felt guilty about keeping your secret. Whoever they were, they did me a favor. Derek finally found his voice. Simone, please. I'm not done yet, she cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. Because the best part, the absolute cherry on top of this disaster, happened right here tonight. In my own home. She clicked to the final evidence slide and Vanessa actually gasped. It was an audio file, the waveform visible on the screen. Simone clicked play, and Vanessa's voice filled the dining room, crisp and clear through the television speakers. It's going exactly as planned. She has no idea. He'll be mine again by Valentine's Day. The voice on the recording laughed, confident and cruel. I know. I thought it would be harder, but honestly, she's so trusting. And he's so easy. It's almost too simple. Simone let the full recording play. Every damning word. Every casual dismissal of Simone's intelligence. Every cocky assertion that Derek was just a game to be won, a prize to be reclaimed. When it ended, the silence in the room was absolute. Vanessa found her voice first, and it was shaking with fury. This is a violation of privacy. You recorded me? That's illegal. Simone turned to her with a smile that could have frozen fire. In my own home? I can record whatever I want. It's a one-party consent state, Vanessa. And I'm the party who consented. You were a guest in my house, using my bathroom, plotting to destroy my marriage. I'd say recording that is not just legal but prudent. You had no right. I had every right. For the first time, Simone's composure cracked, her voice rising. You walked into my home, sat at my table, ate my food, and the entire time you were plotting to steal my husband. You smiled to my face while planning to ruin my life. Don't you dare talk to me about rights. Derek stood up so fast his chair almost tipped over. His face was white, sweat beading on his forehead. Simone, let me explain. Please, just let me explain. Explain what exactly? Simone's voice was cold again, controlled. Explain how you've been lying to me for 6 months? Explain how you bought your ex-girlfriend an $18,000 bracelet while giving me a gift card? Explain how you invited her to our New Year's Eve dinner so you could sit here and reminisce about your perfect past while I played the fool. It wasn't supposed to happen, Derek said, and his voice was breaking. Vanessa reached out last summer just wanting to catch up. We started talking just as friends at first, I swear. But then you fell back into old patterns, Simone finished for him. But then you remembered how good it used to be. But then you decided that 8 years of marriage vows meant nothing compared to nostalgia for your college girlfriend. Gretchen had been silent through all of this, but now she spoke, her voice sharp. Derek, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't do this. Derek looked at his mother and something in him seemed to collapse. Mom, I didn't mean for it to happen. I love Simone, I do, but Vanessa and I, we have history. We understand each other. It's complicated. It's not complicated at all, Julian interjected, his voice dripping with disdain. You're a cheater. You've been screwing your ex-girlfriend for 6 months while your wife cooked you dinner and pressed your shirts and believed your lies. That's not complicated. That's just pathetic. Vanessa stood up, grabbing her purse. Derek, don't. We don't owe her anything. We don't have to explain ourselves. And there it was. The final confirmation, delivered with casual arrogance. We them against Simone. A united front of betrayal. Julian actually laughed, a sharp, harsh sound. Oh, you absolute trash goblin. You really think you're going to walk out of here with him? After all this? Watch me, Vanessa snapped. Sit down. Simone's voice cut through the room like a whip. Both of you. Because I'm not done yet. There was something in her tone that made even Vanessa pause. Something cold and final and absolutely certain. Derek sank back into his chair like a puppet with cut strings. Vanessa remained standing, but she didn't move toward the door. Simone clicked to the next slide, and her smile was terrifying in its calmness. You see, everything I've shown you so far? That was just the warm-up. That was me proving what you did. Now comes the part where I show you what I'm going to do about it. The screen changed, and the title that appeared made Derek's face go from white to gray. Asset Distribution and Legal Consequences. If you're sitting there with your jaw on the floor right now, hit that subscribe button because what Simone reveals next is going to blow your mind. This woman came prepared, and she's about to show everyone what happens when you mess with someone who's smarter than you think. Gretchen was staring at her son like she'd never seen him before. Derek, how could you? After everything, how could you do this to your marriage? Mom, I can explain. No, Gretchen said sharply. I don't think you can. I don't think there's any explanation that makes this acceptable. It was the first time in 8 years that Gretchen had taken Simone's side over her son's, and the shock of it seemed to hit Derek harder than anything else that had happened tonight. Vanessa was looking between Derek and the screen, her earlier confidence evaporating. Derek, we should leave. We don't have to listen to this. But Derek wasn't moving. He was staring at the screen at the words, asset distribution and legal consequences, and the full weight of what was happening was finally sinking in. Simone stood at the head of the table, laptop in hand, looking like an avenging angel in her emerald silk blouse. She'd spent the entire evening being gracious and accommodating, playing the perfect hostess while her world burned around her. But that woman was gone. What stood in her place was someone harder, colder, someone who had finally stopped pretending that love could survive this level of betrayal. Oh, we're just getting started, Simone said, her finger hovering over the touchpad. Because you wanted to know what's coming next? Let me show you exactly what's coming next. She clicked to the next slide, and Derek actually made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. This was going to be a New Year's Eve that none of them would ever forget. Here's what I need to know from you. If you were in Simone's position with all this evidence, what would you do? Would you burn it all down or try to salvage something? Let me know in the comments, because Simone's about to make a choice that changes everything. But this is where Simone Hartwell does something that will leave you absolutely speechless. Because while Derek and Vanessa thought they were playing chess, Simone had already won the game before they even sat down at the table. Picture Simone's face. Calm, collected, almost peaceful. And then she says the words that change everything, but here's what you don't know, Derek. New images flash onto the screen behind her. And these aren't vacation photos or romantic text messages. These are business documents, bank statements, corporate filings. The kind of paperwork that tells a very different story than the one Derek thought he was controlling. 6 months ago, Simone begins, her voice steady as steel, when your behavior changed, when you started working late, when you became distant, when you stopped wearing your wedding ring to the gym, I didn't just cry into my pillow and wait for answers. I hired a forensic accountant. She pauses, letting that sink in. 6 months. While Derek thought he was being clever, Simone was 10 steps ahead. Want to guess what they found? The slides change and what appears is devastating. Bank records showing systematic transfers from joint accounts into hidden accounts Derek had opened without her knowledge. We're not talking about small amounts here. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, methodically moved over months like someone planning an exit strategy. But it gets worse. So much worse. Partnership incorporation papers appear on the screen. A new business entity filed just 3 weeks ago. And who are the founding partners? Derek Hartwell and Vanessa Chin. The company name? Pinnacle Strategic Consulting. Their planned launch date? 3 months from now. And here's the part that makes your blood boil. The initial capital investment listed in these documents is $250,000. The exact amount of the inheritance Simone received when her grandmother passed away 2 years ago. Money that was supposed to be hers. Money that was supposed to be protected. Money that Derek had convinced her to put into their joint investment account for better returns. He wasn't just cheating on her. He was stealing from her to fund his future with the woman he was cheating with. But wait, because Simone isn't done. Not even close. Another slide appears. Text messages between Derek and Vanessa, and this time they're not talking about hotel rooms or secret meetings. They're talking about money. About business plans. About their future together. Vanessa's text reads, "Are you sure we'll have enough capital to launch properly? My contact at Silverman Industries is ready to sign, but we need to be operational." Derek's response? "Don't worry. Once the divorce is final, we'll have enough to launch. She'll never see it coming. The inheritance money is already moved. She signed the investment documents without reading them, just like I knew she would." Let me repeat that. She'll never see it coming. The audacity. The calculated cruelty. Derek wasn't just ending his marriage. He was systematically dismantling Simone's financial security to build a new life with her replacement. And he was laughing about how easy it was. Now, before we get to what happens next, if you're as invested in this story as I am, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what Simone does in the next few minutes is the most savage, brilliant takedown you will ever witness, and you're going to want to be here for everything we cover on this channel. Trust me, this is just the beginning. The room has gone completely silent. Gretchen's hand is over her mouth. Marcus looks like he's watching a car crash in slow motion. Vanessa's face has drained of all color, and Derek looks like a man who's just realized he's been walking into a trap. And then Simone delivers the blow that ends everything. "What you didn't see coming," she says, and there's almost a smile in her voice now, "is that I've already filed for divorce. The papers were served to your office this morning. But I instructed your secretary to wait until 5 p.m. to deliver them to you personally." Derek's eyes widen. You can see him trying to process this, trying to figure out how this is possible. "Right now," Simone continues, checking her elegant watch, "it's 5:07 p.m. Which means you've been served. Which means the clock has started ticking. Which means everything I'm about to tell you is already in motion, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing, you can do to stop it." She advances to the next slide. Bank statements with large red stamps across them. Account frozen. I've frozen all joint accounts as of this morning. Every dollar you thought you had access to? Gone. The investment account where you hid my inheritance money? The forensic accountant found it. My lawyer has already filed an emergency motion, and a judge signed off on freezing those assets pending the divorce proceedings. Derek's mouth opens but no sound comes out. The house. Simone tilts her head slightly. It's in my name. Solely in my name. My inheritance, remember? The one your mother convinced you to let me keep in my name alone for tax purposes? Turns out Gretchen gave me better advice than she ever gave you. Gretchen makes a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. But Simone isn't finished. Not even remotely. Now about your career, Derek. The one you're so proud of. The one that made you feel entitled to treat me like I was disposable. I've contacted your firm's ethics board about the embezzlement. That's what it's called, by the way, when you take marital assets and hide them for personal gain. They're very interested in reviewing the investment opportunities you've been creating with client funds and personal accounts. The color drains from Derek's face so fast you'd think someone pulled a plug. They're particularly interested, Simone continues, her voice never rising, never wavering, in how a senior associate who's supposed to be advising clients on fiduciary responsibility has been creating shell companies and moving assets into hidden accounts. Not a great look for someone up for partner, is it? Then Simone turns to Vanessa, and the temperature in the room somehow drops another 10 degrees. And Vanessa. Sweet, ambitious Vanessa. Your company, Chin and Associates Strategic Marketing, they'll be absolutely fascinated to learn about your relationship with a potential client's husband while you were actively negotiating contracts with his firm. Vanessa's eyes go wide. You wouldn't? That's called a conflict of interest, Simone continues as if Vanessa hadn't spoken. It violates every ethics policy in corporate contracting. Silverman Industries, the company you've been courting for 6 months? The one Derek was going to help you secure through his firm's connections? They're going to be very interested to know that their potential marketing director was sleeping with the attorney handling their account. They tend to frown on that sort of thing. Something about legal liability and corporate integrity. You can see Vanessa's entire future crumbling in real time. The business she was planning to start with Derek. The contracts she'd been counting on. The reputation she'd built. All of it disintegrating like paper and fire. Derek suddenly lunges forward, his hands slamming on the table. You can't do this. His voice is desperate now, all pretense of control gone. You're ruining everything. You're being vindictive. This is. Simone doesn't flinch. Doesn't step back. Doesn't even blink. She simply says in that same calm, measured voice, I already have. 3 words. That's all it takes. 3 words that contain more power than all of Derek's shouting and threats combined. The papers are filed, Simone continues. The accounts are frozen. The ethics complaints are submitted. The evidence is documented. Every text message, every bank transfer, every secret document, it's all been copied, certified, and delivered to the appropriate authorities. You're not just losing me, Derek. You're losing everything. And then Gretchen speaks. Gretchen, who has been silent this entire time, who has watched her son's sins laid bare in excruciating detail. Her voice is barely a whisper, but in the silence of that room, it sounds like thunder. Derek, what have you done? Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Simone is justified in destroying Derek's career along with ending the marriage, or should she have kept it just about the divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this debate is about to get heated. And that question from his own mother, that moment when even his biggest defender can't find a way to excuse what he's done, that might be the most devastating blow of all. Because Derek isn't just losing his wife, his money, and his career. He's losing his family's respect. And that's something no amount of charm or manipulation can ever get back. The aftermath of truth is always messy. And what happens next in that dining room is the complete disintegration of Derek Hartwell's carefully constructed world. Derek collapses into his chair like a puppet with its strings cut. His hands go to his head, fingers digging into his hair, and for the first time all evening he looks exactly like what he is. A man who gambled everything and lost. Not because he was unlucky, but because he underestimated the woman he promised to love and honor. You can see his chest heaving, hear the ragged breathing of someone whose entire reality has just been dismantled piece by piece. And there's something almost pathetic about it. This man who walked in so confident, so sure of his control, now reduced to this broken thing in a designer suit. Vanessa, meanwhile, has had enough. She grabs her coat with shaking hands, her face twisted with rage and fear. You're psychotic, she screams at Simone, and isn't that interesting? The woman who helped destroy a marriage, who conspired to steal another woman's inheritance, who built her future on lies and betrayal, she's calling Simone psychotic for simply telling the truth. Simone doesn't even look at her. And Vanessa storms out, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor, the sound of someone running from consequences they never thought would catch them. The door slams behind her with such force that the champagne glasses on the table rattle. She's gone. Probably already calculating how to do damage control, how to spin this, how to save whatever scraps of her reputation she can salvage. But she can run all she wants. The truth is already out there, documented, certified, submitted to every person and organization that matters. There's no escaping it now. Then Gretchen stands. Slowly, like every movement costs her something. And when she looks at her son, really looks at him, there's something in her eyes that's worse than anger. It's disappointment. It's heartbreak. It's the look of a mother realizing she doesn't recognize her own child. Your father would be ashamed, she says quietly. Just 7 words. But the way Derek flinches, you'd think she'd struck him. Because for all his arrogance, for all his entitled confidence, Derek Hartwell is still his father's son. And the ghost of the man who raised him, the man whose name Derek carries, whose legacy he was supposed to honor, that ghost has just witnessed everything. And found him wanting. Gretchen picks up her purse and without another word she leaves. Not in anger. Not with the dramatic fury of Vanessa's exit. Just leaves. Like she can't bear to be in the same room as her son anymore. And somehow that's more devastating than any speech she could have given. The door closes behind her with a soft click that sounds like a coffin being sealed. Now it's just Derek, Simone, Marcus and Julian in that beautiful dining room, surrounded by the remnants of an elegant dinner that was really an execution. Derek finally looks up and his eyes are red-rimmed, wet. I never meant, his voice cracks. I do love you, Simone. And for just a moment you might feel a twinge of sympathy for him. Because he sounds so broken, so genuinely devastated. He sounds like a man who's just realized what he's lost. But Simone's response cuts through that sympathy like a surgical blade. No, she says, her voice clear and steady. You love the idea of me. The successful wife who made you look good at firm dinners. The perfect life that checked all the boxes for partnership. The woman who managed your mother, your home, your image. But you never actually saw me, Derek. Not really. Because if you had, you would have known I was never going to be the woman who just accepted this. Let that sink in for a moment. Because that's the real tragedy here, isn't it? Not that Derek fell out of love. People fall out of love. Not even that he cheated, though that's devastating enough. The real tragedy is that he never truly valued the woman he married. She was an accessory. A supporting character in the story of his life. And when he got bored with that story he thought he could just write her out. He never saw her as a person with her own agency, her own intelligence, her own capacity for strategy. He saw her as a prop. And that's why he lost everything. If you're watching this and thinking about what it really means to see your partner, to truly value them as an equal, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Because the stories we tell here aren't just about drama. They're about power, respect, and what happens when people forget that everyone they meet is fighting battles they know nothing about. Hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started. Julian, who's been standing quietly to the side this entire time, moves closer to Simone. Are you okay? He asks softly, and there's genuine concern in his voice. Not the performative concern of someone playing a role, but real human worry for a friend who's just gone through something emotionally devastating, even if she orchestrated it. Simone takes a breath. And then she says something that explains everything, not just this evening but who she is, how she became this person, why she was capable of planning and executing this elaborate revelation. I watched my mother waste 20 years on a man who lied to her face every day, she begins, and you can hear the weight of that history in her voice. My father was charming. Everyone loved him. But behind closed doors there was always someone else. Always some excuse. Always some story that didn't quite add up. And my mother just accepted it. Made excuses for him. Convinced herself it was normal, that all marriages were like this, that she was being dramatic or paranoid. She pauses, and when she continues, her voice is stronger. I promised myself I'd never be that woman. I promised myself that if I ever found myself in a relationship where something felt wrong, I wouldn't ignore it. I wouldn't gaslight myself. I wouldn't waste decades of my life on someone who was lying to me. It's all coming together now, isn't it? Simone's hyper-awareness. Her ability to read micro-expressions and catalog inconsistencies. Her methodical approach to gathering evidence. This isn't just about being smart or strategic. This is about survival. This is about breaking a generational cycle of accepting less than you deserve. When you grow up reading every micro-expression, every inconsistency, every time a story doesn't quite match the timeline, Simone continues, you develop a sixth sense for dishonesty. I knew something was wrong at Thanksgiving. The way you avoided eye contact when your mother asked about work. The way you kept checking your phone and then putting it face down. The way you said you were going to Cincinnati but your calendar showed Cleveland. I just needed proof. Derek's head snaps up, and there's something wild in his eyes now. So this whole dinner was a trap? He sounds betrayed, which is almost funny considering he's the one who destroyed their marriage. You invited everyone here, you set up this entire evening just to humiliate me? And this is where Simone shows why she's not just intelligent but wise. Why her revenge isn't petty or cruel, but measured and purposeful. This dinner was a gift, she says simply. Derek blinks, clearly not understanding. I could have humiliated you publicly, Simone explains. I could have sent the evidence to your firm without warning. Could have forwarded those text messages to every attorney in your professional network. Could have posted everything on social media for the entire world to see and dissect and judge. I could have destroyed you professionally without giving you any chance to prepare, to explain, to even understand what was happening. She walks closer to Derek and her voice is almost gentle now. Instead, I gave you one last evening as the man you pretended to be. I let you enjoy that wine you picked out. Let you make your little toast about new beginnings. Let you have one final moment of feeling like you were in control, like you were winning. That wasn't cruelty, Derek. That was mercy. The sophistication of that mindset is breathtaking. Because Simone could have been vindictive. She had every right to be. But instead, she chose something more powerful. She chose to maintain her dignity while dismantling his life with precision rather than rage. That's not just revenge. That's art. In the background, you can hear the television counting down. The New Year's celebration that everyone's been anticipating all evening. 10, 9, 8. Simone walks away from Derek, moving toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the city. Manhattan spreads out below like a glittering promise, thousands of lights marking thousands of lives, thousands of stories playing out in real time. Julian joins her, carrying 2 champagne flutes. He hands one to Simone, and they stand together, watching the city prepare to celebrate. 3, 1. The sky explodes with fireworks. Brilliant bursts of color painting the darkness. Gold and silver and blue and red, cascading light that reflects off the buildings and the river and the windows of a million apartments where people are kissing, cheering, toasting to new beginnings. Happy New Year, Simone, Julian says quietly. And Simone, still watching the fireworks paint the sky, allows herself the smallest smile. Not triumphant. Not cruel. Just peaceful. The smile of someone who's just closed one chapter and is ready to begin another. It will be, she says. And you believe her. Because if tonight has proven anything, it's that Simone Hartwell is a woman who doesn't just survive, she transforms. She takes the worst thing that could happen and turns it into liberation. Behind her, reflected in the window, you can see Derek still slumped at the dining table, head in his hands, surrounded by the beautiful remnants of the dinner that ended his world. The contrast is stark. Him in darkness and defeat. Her silhouetted against fireworks and possibility. And then Simone's voice comes again, this final reflection that crystallizes everything we've witnessed. My father taught me what a liar looks like. My husband taught me what I'm worth. And I taught myself that the best revenge isn't anger, it's being prepared. That's the lesson here. Not that you should seek revenge. Not that you should orchestrate elaborate confrontations. But that knowledge is power. That preparation is protection. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and refuse to be gaslit into accepting less than you deserve. Simone didn't win by being cruel. She won by being smarter, more observant, more prepared than the person who thought she could be taken for granted. She won by refusing to play the role Derek assigned her, the oblivious wife, the convenient victim, the woman who would just accept whatever he decided to do. She rewrote the script. She took control of her own story. And she walked away not as a bitter, angry, vengeful ex-wife, but as a woman who knows exactly who she is and exactly what she's worth. Now here's my question for you. If you found yourself in Simone's position, with proof of betrayal but before confronting your partner, would you orchestrate a public reveal like this, or would you handle it privately? What's the right way to end a relationship when trust has been completely shattered? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I genuinely want to know where you stand on this. The fireworks continue. The city celebrates. And somewhere in that beautiful apartment overlooking Manhattan, a woman who was supposed to be a victim just proved she was always the author of her own story. That's the real twist. Not the evidence, not the frozen accounts, not even the destroyed careers. The real twist is that Derek Hartwell never stood a chance. Because he was playing checkers while his wife was playing chess. And she'd been planning her endgame for 6 months. Happy New Year indeed.